Anyway, let's turn to another thing that's pretty tough to forecast, and that's the job market. Also, those weaker than anticipated September employment numbers that we saw. A big reason for the jobs numbers being weak is that employers just can't find workers right now. There's not that there's no demand, there's no workers. That's why CNBC is launching a new series this week. It's called The Lost Workers, where we try and explain who the missing workers are, why they're on the sidelines, and what can be done to bring them back. Senior economics reporter Steve Leisman joins us right now. He's got a look at who some of these missing millions of workers are. Hi, Steve.
Hey, good morning, Becky. Yeah, evidence for the lost workers, it's everywhere in everyday American life. It's in the help wanted signs hanging in the windows of the stores that are closed at odd hours for lack of workers. It's in the inflation numbers where employers have had to bid up wages, pass those costs along to consumers. And it was in the weak jobs number Friday, where at least part of the reason for a lack of hiring is a lack of workers to hire. Three classes of people stand out: women, retirees, and immigrants. We'll go through those. Of the 3.1 million fewer workers in the workforce today, 63%, or about 2 million, are women. This is the reverse of the last recessions and even most recessions, where it's men who tend to drop out in greater numbers than women. Women aged 20 to 34, they represent about half of the lost women workers. It's an indication that childcare issues and school closings could be a major reason for their absence. The number of Americans 65 and over leaving the workforce each month ratcheted up to a new level. You can see it right there with the onset of the pandemic. And it's never returned. 145,000 Americans in this age group drop out of the labor force every month, up from 93,000. That means there's been an extra 1 million plus retirees over the past 20 months, according to our calculations. Finally, a decline in immigration began in the Trump administration before the pandemic. It increased during the pandemic with shutdowns of immigration, and it's eased only somewhat with the Biden administration. They haven't brought back all of the immigration there was. David Byer, a senior fellow at the Cato Institute, tells me the lack of immigrant workers is a substantial portion of the labor shortage. You're talking about cumulatively hundreds of thousands of fewer workers that the economy would have been expecting to be present, but are not. Byer estimates 500,000 lost legal immigrant workers. Their absence has meant a decline in, guess what, au pairs from abroad. That's part of the reason the U.S. has 100,000 fewer childcare workers, which is part of the reason women aren't working. So, Becky, it's all sort of intertwined as one thing. It's a lot like the supply chain problem, but in this case, it's the labor supply problem.
You know, if you look at women in those age groups, I think the question probably becomes, can they eventually be lured to come back into the workforce? And same thing with retirees. It doesn't surprise me, I guess, to hear that people age 65 and up are leaving the workforce more rapidly than they had been before, because guess what? They are also the highest risk when it comes to COVID. You may think, okay, I was going to retire and then maybe work part-time, but maybe it's not worth it if I'm risking that in a COVID environment. Post-COVID, do you find any of these demographics coming back?
You can't say somebody's not going to do something until you say the price they're not going to do it at, right? I mean, you're right. Wages could be an issue. Safety in the workplace could be an issue. And when it comes to women, I'm not decided yet until we get the schools open. I want to see the numbers next month. I'm optimistic about that when the schools are sort of reliably open. You remember we did that story early in September that some schools had opened and closed down.
It was
I think that might have been something
closed.
that was a deterrent to getting people into the workforce. And now that they seem to be more reliably open, we'll see if that's a key issue to getting people back to work. Plus, I think a lot of women lost low-paying service jobs, and they may not be in such a hurry to go back to them.
Steve, thanks. Good to see you.